So we pick up, we're doing our Old Testament survey, and we're picking up today in Genesis 34. We started this last week, and boy, that's a mess. And this is a story, I'll tell you, this story, Genesis 34, reminds me the most of stories in Judges. It's a little bit more developed than a lot of the Judges stories, but I think it is the same kind of genre that you see in the book of Judges. And I think generally, making a gross generalization, these kind of awful stories that are violent are warnings. And I think it's a poignant warning to Christians today uh, about watering down your standards and letting yourself have a worldly, industrial, secular approach to your life, that there are grave consequences in doing that. So let's, but I don't know how far we'll get. I don't think we'll get all the way through chapter 50 today. I'm trying to keep speed. I'm trying not to go back in heavy dosage back in Genesis. But I'm wanting, when I make a statement and I say, how does this relate to Genesis 38? We did that last week. I want to read through those passages so everybody can see what I'm talking about, and don't just take my word for it. So last week we looked at Genesis 30 and Jacob and his wives, and it was an absolute mess, a train wreck. Jacob willfully sought his own plan and created a mess in his household. I do not think that he was obedient to God. As I said last week, I believe when he woke up the next morning and it was Leah lying there next to him, he had been tricked. He had been duped by his father-in-law, and very much I think that was seen as justice because he was a deceiver. Jacob had used deceit, and I think that the deceiver got deceived, but I believe that Leah was his intended wife. I made that case last week. She was instantly fertile, having babies. She ended up having 7 children. 7 is the number of complete. So that symbolically 7 children means she had all the children she was supposed to have. Everybody else had difficulty having children and only had 2, the other 3 wives. But Jacob was willful. He wanted Rachel, so he made a deal for Rachel, and that caused tension between Leah and Rachel. Rachel gave her handmaid, and he fathered children by the handmaid. Then Leah countered with her handmaid, and he fathered 2 children by the other handmaid. And it was a competitive, awful household. And the weight falls on Jacob. And that's important because that household he created leads directly into the awful situation we see in Genesis 34. Everything in Genesis 34 relates back, that the family does, relates back to Jacob's disobedience, Jacob's willfulness, Jacob's, I've got to have things my way, as Jacob's family travels through the land. Just in way of review, just looking at some of the chaos in Genesis 33. So Rachel said, here's my maid Bilhah. Go into her, Jacob. She'll bear a child. Then she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as a wife. They use the term wife there loosely. Bilhah was a concubine. He must have given her some kind of official recognition, because there are other places that they just call them concubine. But it's very clear that there was status among the wives. They were not all loved equally. They didn't have all the same status. Jacob went into her. Bilhah conceived and bore him a son. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Afterward, and this is important for Genesis 34, Leah bore a daughter named Dinah. We pick up in Genesis 34, now Dinah, and they're traveling back through the land of Canaan. Now Dinah, it says the daughter of Leah. Now that's a significant thing. Uh, the author wants to remind us that she is the daughter of the unloved wife. In my opinion, as I read all the clues, God's choice for Jacob's wife. This is the daughter there. So we're, as hearers in the ancient world, us today as readers, we're to immediately say, Jacob did not give Leah attention. I wonder if he takes care of Leah's daughter in the way that a father should take care of a daughter. Well, Dinah went out to see the daughters of the land. So Dinah has stepped outside of the safety of the family, the protection of her brothers, and she is going interacting with the Canaanites. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It is bad. In Bible clues, it is a bad thing. They've been told to be very careful because they say if you start interacting with people who don't love God, there is one God who created us. If you begin interacting with polytheistic people, you will pick up their mannerisms, you'll pick up their appetites, you'll pick up their taste of things, and before you know it, you'll drift away from God. And so it's not something necessarily bad about those people. They have chosen to be polytheistic, and you're going to drift away from God if you do. So Dinah makes a choice here. That's very important. Dinah is both guilty and a victim. And isn't that the truth about life? We are all guilty of sin choices, and then our sin choices often get us into trouble and we become victims of our sin too. It's very ironic. Verse 2, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite is their race, prince of the country, saw her, he took her. Now, Shechem is the name of the city. In Hebrew, it means shoulder. The city, there is a road. If you can imagine Israel going north to south, Shechem is located right on the watershed. So if water falls over here, it goes towards the Jordan River. If it falls over here, it goes to the Mediterranean Sea. And there is a road that goes around, and there are two mountains on each side of that road. One is one is Mount Ebal, and on the shoulder of that mountain is this city called Shechem, and the word Shechem means shoulder. So it's a fort on the shoulder of Mount Ebal, and it is anytime you see a fortified city in the Bible, it is protecting an invasion round. And so this road is where an army would invade from the north into the central watershed region of the Promised Land. And there is a fortified city there to protect it, Shechem. And the king of that city is Hamor. Hamor means donkey, and that has a dual meaning, most likely. A donkey in the ancient world was a symbol for trade, and Hamor is a negotiator. So that name gives us some insight into his role in this story. And remember, the Bible, most of the stories in the Bible were originally told as orally, as a story. And so I think often names were changed from, Hamor's name was probably Freddie originally, but it was changed to Hamor as they repeated this ancient story to give us some clues about the people. That often happens. Now his name might have been Hamor, but often in the Bible we are getting a story that is giving us clues about the nature of these characters in their name. A donkey also, in the same way it is today, the old King James name for a donkey, and how we use that term now, it is for a fool, an untrustworthy, a low character. And so probably both those things are intended. He's a negotiator, but he's a person of weak character, and we see that in this story. So Hamor is the king of this fortified city. Shechem is his son, the prince of the country. He saw her, and he took her, and he lay with her, and violated her. This is a New King James. It is being nice. I believe the Old King James says he raped her. That term, anah, is got a range of meaning in it. Um, he had intercourse with her. And in the eyes of the Bible author, it really doesn't matter if she agreed, if she was consensual or not. It is still sinful. They are not married. It does matter. It does matter to Dinah quite a bit, I'm sure, and I don't want to make light of that. But he takes her into his household, and he has intercourse out of wedlock, and that is a grievous sin. And the two sons of Jacob will say, this is a thing that ought not be done in Israel. It's a shameful thing. And still today, it's a thing that should not be done. Sexuality was given for the marriage bed. And that is it is a blessed thing, and that is the only legitimate application, according to the Bible, for human sexuality. Now, this is bad enough, straight up bad, but it gets worse when you consider a couple things. I'm going to give some cross references here why these things are bad scripturally. But before, when Abraham had sought a wife for Isaac, this is kind of the background that makes this a terrible thing. Back 10 chapters earlier, when Abraham was ready, when Isaac got marrying age, and remember, Isaac is the long-awaited, the promised child. Moses prayed for 25 years to have Isaac. Abraham said to his servant Eleazar, swear by Yahweh, God of heaven and earth, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the land, the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live. But you will go to my country, Mesopotamia, northern part of Mesopotamia, Haran, and take a wife for my son Isaac. So they are under, Abraham is considered a prophet. They were under a prophetic mandate not to intermarry with the Canaanites, the Perizzites or the Hivites. When Isaac later sought a wife for his son Jacob, so Jacob had been through this. So keep this in mind when you watch how Jacob behaves to these Canaanites. In chapter 27, Rebekah said to Isaac, I'm tired of living because of the daughters of Heth, Canaanites, daughters of the land. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be? So Dinah going out to visit the daughters of the land, we're supposed to put these pieces together, shows a couple things. It is a very dangerous trend for the Israelites to be interacting socially with the people of the land. And that means she's either being rebellious, but it's also a bad reflection back on Jacob as a father. Either Jacob did not teach his daughter what he had been taught, or he had paid no attention to his daughter and she was just running wild out of his purview. Ellie can tell you that I consider it one of my greatest jobs to watch after her. And she's like, Dad, what's the big deal when I come in late? I'm 21. And then she gets a 30-minute lecture on what the big deal is. And she says, okay, I got it. I knew that. I said, do we need to just number the lectures and I give you the number? It is a father's job to look out for his daughters. And so Jacob is also complicit here. I think both of them have done wrong. I think Dinah is flaunting and putting herself in danger. And she gets in danger. She gets taken hostage and raped. Even if, in the eye of the author, even if she consented, it's still a rape. It's still inappropriate. It is a taking of something that you have no right to. What good will my life be to me? So then in the next chapter, so Isaac called Jacob, he blessed him and charged him, saying, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise and go to Padan Aram, that's in northern Mesopotamia, and from there take a wife. And so we know as readers, the characters in the story know we're to be very careful about our interactions with the people of the land. So Dinah has disobeyed when she goes out to visit the daughters of the land. The plot thickens in verse 3. Shechem, his soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved that young woman and spoke kindly to her. Now, that is evidence that people use today to say that it was a consensual relationship and not a forced violent act. But again, I say to you, Jimmy Crackcorn, the Bible author, don't care. Don't care what. Dinah did not say, I must be married. Shechem did not say, I must be married. And so he's trying to make up after the fact here. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, get me this young woman as a wife. Now watch Jacob's very passive reaction here. And Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. All right, I have a huge problem, and I think the biblical author is letting us know that Jacob is failing to lead his family here. He is getting passive. He is waiting. And we don't know why. That's part of the thing of storytelling. They don't tell us why people do what they do. They throw the action out. And you're supposed to put yourselves into the story and say, what would be going on with me if I found out a horrible thing, that my daughter had been taken and she is being held hostage, even though she may be there of her own free will, and I am sitting waiting for somebody else to take care of the situation. Then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob came in from the field when they had heard it. Now contrast Jacob's passive reaction with King David's. King David's daughter Tamar was raped by her half-brother. Now when King David heard all these matters, he was very angry. Absalom, his other son, who was a full brother to Tamar and a half-brother to Amnon, who raped her, Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. And I don't believe it was Absalom. Amnon gets killed pretty quick after this. I don't remember the exact circumstances. Back to Genesis 34. Jacob is waiting, held his peace until the sons came home, and then Simeon and Levi were grieved, and they were very angry, like David. Leah is their full sister. Simeon and Levi are sons of Leah. Very angry because Shechem had done a disgraceful thing in Israel. This is the first time that they are called the nation of Israel. Jacob's name, after he wrestled with the angel, was changed to Israel. Israel means struggles with God, wrestles with God. And this is the first time they're called that in the Bible. This is a disgraceful thing that had been done by lying with Jacob's daughter. Again, the author reminds us she was called Leah, the daughter of Leah, now the daughter of Jacob. And that phrase, Jacob's daughter, or the daughter of Jacob, is an indictment by the author. He is making it very plain that Jacob is sitting there twiddling his thumb when his daughter was violated. A thing which ought not be done. Said it twice in that verse. The norms of right and wrong, of moral right and wrong, have been violated here. Hamor suggests intermarrying, but Hamor spoke with them. The soul of my son longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife. Again, what's in the background? He says, give her as a wife. He has her in captivity. Why he says that? So he's bargaining with all the chips right now. And make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us. Take our daughters to yourself. Now, so Jacob should have been more active in saying, I want my daughter back. Now, how should he react to this idea of intermarrying? God said, no, we're not interested. Whoa, just stop right there. So you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade in it, acquire possessions for yourself. So notice, Hamor did not apologize. There was not a word of, we have done a grievous thing, and I want to make it right. Nor did he bring back Dinah while an honorable agreement is negotiated. He's holding all the cards, and he's got a chip. He's not being graceful here. Though he seems candid, we'll see in a little bit that he is holding back his true intentions. God's instructions through Moses back in Deuteronomy chapter 7. Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. So this Deuteronomy will actually be written later, but there is an understanding that God's principles are timeless. It is later that these are written down. Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons. You shall not take their daughters for your son. That's almost verbatim of what Hamor had said. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord, the anger of Yahweh, will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. Intermarrying with people of another faith will drive a wedge between man and God. I mean, God says, I'll take you out if you begin intermarrying with people. I believe God's purpose, and I'm very messianic. I believe all along Jesus is the plan. The purpose of God's relationship with the Israelites is to have a holy people that are separated by a sense of moral right and wrong because God is holy, that Jesus will be born to those people. And if they begin to intermarry with pagan people, they will lose their holiness. Paganism is common. Paganism is find a God that condones your will and worship that God, and then you get to do what you want to. That is the nature of paganism. Paganism in the ancient world where everybody was spiritual is the equivalent to modern philosophical secular thought. And it is alluring. And Christians in droves are being lured away from the Bible and God's Word by this world. And it starts out, well, just look your Bible up online, which is a good thing. It's fine. I'm glad people can look their Bible up anywhere. Now look over and see, Google what somebody thinks that means. And as you Google, you'll have a good, somebody good will talk, and then you're going down and there'll be somebody with, well, here's some problems. And before you know it, you don't believe the Bible anymore is inspired by God. And we shouldn't be surprised by that. God has given the devil free rein in this world to try to give people an alternative to God and faith in God, so that when we come to God in faith, it is real. It's not the default. Loving God and having faith in Him is not falling off a log. We have He has given, because we have choice, He has allowed the devil to give us alternatives to God, and he's doing it well. So Shechem pleads. Danny?
Have you ever seen this on the Christian Network? They have a movie that all of this.
About Genesis 34?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hadn't seen it in a long time, maybe 10 years. But before that, they used to show it 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. I wrote a 50-page paper on this chapter one time, and so I would be interested to see what they say. Then Shechem said to his father and her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes. Whatever you say to me, I will give." And so Shechem comes across as a noble young man. I said last week, John Calvin said, well, he started out really bad, but he's working hard to be noble and redeem himself. And Martin Luther, who was a contemporary of John Calvin's, when he wrote his commentary, his daughter was 12 years old at the time, and he said, God has prepared a special pit in hell for Shechem. So the difference that daughter makes in the way you interpret things. Let me find favor in your eyes. We see later that he is conning them. And so I don't know what. Calvin stopped reading at some point. And that's what a lot of people do when we get the interpretation we want, we stop reading. Let me just go ahead and tell you, after Gideon fights his battle, if you want Gideon to be a hero, after he fights his battle and busts the jars, and he does say, for Yahweh and Gideon, which is a big clue, stop reading at that point. Stop reading, because Gideon is a scumbag. And so if you want to like Gideon, just stop reading. That's what people do. And I believe John Calvin stopped reading after this verse, because Shechem is not a noble character. Ask me ever so much, and he and I will probably argue in heaven. We'll see.
Didn't he die after they had the circumcision for the wedding? All the people in the land did, and then
yeah, he's executed. Yeah, here in a few more verses. Ask me ever so much dowry and gift, I will give you according to what you say, but give me the young woman as wife. I mean, he does seem to be sincerely attached to Dinah. But again, the Bible says it don't matter. It don't matter. It don't matter. Do things in the correct order. Please God. Be obedient. But the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor and spoke deceitfully. Because they had defiled their sister. So the Bible author's giving us hints. Where did they learn to speak deceitfully?
The father.
They learned from their father. And so you see, always, the Bible always, if you want to see most of the time, if you want to see a good, true story of who people are, truthfully, you look and see how their children behave in the Bible. And again, going back to Gideon, Gideon's son, Abimelech, is one of the worst, most awful characters in the Bible. But Samuel has some bad sons. David has some bad sons. So, verse 14, they said to the men of Shechem, we cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised. Now that is true. For that would be a reproach to us. But on this occasion, we will consent to you if you will become as we are, if you'll get circumcised. If every male is circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to us, dwell with you, and we will become one people. This is a lie. Back in Genesis 17:10, this is God speaking to Abraham. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. So it is a mark of the covenant, a reminder of the special relationship between Israel and God. So it's an ill-fated agreement, verse 17. But if you will not heed us and be circumcised, this is Simeon and Levi talking to Shechem, then we will take our daughters and be gone. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem. So the young man did not delay to do this thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. He was more honorable than all the household of his father. And Hamor and Shechem his son came to the gate of their city and spoke with the men of the city. Now notice the story changes just a little bit. In verse 21, these men are at peace with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For indeed, the land is large enough for them. Let us, notice how their language, we will give our daughters to you. But now they're talking to the other men of Shechem. Let us take their daughters to us as a wife, which is exactly what he has done with Dinah. And let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men consent to dwell with us and be one people. If every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised, will not their livestock, their property, and every animal of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. Okay? We'll take their stuff. All who went out of the city gate. And so this is the fighting men that we're talking about here, the warriors of the city. All who went out of the gate of his city heeded Hamor and Shechem his son. The gate of a fortified city is where judicial decisions are made. A lot of government decisions are made. Every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of the city. Those are all the legal residents of the city, the men of fighting age. Now it came to pass on the third day, when they were in pain, that two sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, again we're reminded, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. Now one little connection. Simeon and Levi. Levi's descendants are the priestly tribe. Moses is a Levi. At Mount Sinai, when they dance dance in a circle around the golden calf, and basically are having a fertility ritual with ostensibly a symbol to Yahweh, but it is a pagan, the way the pagans paid tribute. And a young bull is meant to be a sexual, virile, powerful symbol. When they came down, it said there was a sound like a battle. Moses said, "Who will stand with the Lord this day?" This is Exodus 32. And it says the sons of the tribe of Levi come. And it uses the exact same phrase in Hebrew. Each man took his sword, and they killed 3,000. And so, again, we're supposed to make that connection with this tendency of violence. Now, interestingly, here, Levi and Simeon are indicted for this violent act because it endangers the whole family in the eyes of the Canaanites. And so they are given, neither Simeon nor Levi, the tribes, inherit their own territory in the Promised Land. By that point, the Levites are given cities to dwell in amongst the other tribes so they can serve as priests to them, but they are both penalized for this act. And there is a legacy of violence. Now, it is at Mount Sinai when they serve God, each man in his sword, who killed the apostate, that they are given a place of honor and are basically, Levi becomes the elite guard protecting the tabernacle. They camp in a circle around it. And so Levi is always associated with violence throughout the Old Testament, all the stories. Moses, what's the first thing we find out about Moses when he's a young man? He has a violent tendency. Phineas, the Moabite women come and start seducing Israelite men, and Phineas takes a spear and kills an Israelite man and the Moabite woman, engaged with each other, and just violence with Levi. Dinah's brothers each took his sword, came boldly upon them, killed all the males, executed them. And they killed Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went out. Now let me say, I said this last week, I say again, I believe just kind of reading the clues, the biblical author thinks, yes, Hamor, Shechem, and the men of Shechem have killing coming. What they did is a thing that should not be done. They deserve death. But to deceive them is dishonorable. That Jacob, my interpretation is that Jacob should have stood up and said, Hamor, don't say another word until Dinah is right back here with me. They bring Dinah back, and he says, all right, Hamor, you go get your swords and get your guys and meet us up on the hill. We're going to figure this out right now, man to man. That's the way that I believe the biblical author thinks that things should have been done. Warfare in the Old Testament is expected, and it's supposed to be done honorably. This is not honorable. So let's look and see how people respond. The sons of Jacob then came upon the slain and plundered the city. So this is Reuben, Issachar, Gad, all those guys come. Now, based on where it's positioned, it includes Joseph. It doesn't seem like Joseph to me. And it's a different story for a different time. I think that Genesis has been grouped thematically together. So we're in the Jacob section right now. And then after this story in a little bit, as we'll see, I think we'll have to quit after this, but next week we'll see comes the Joseph stories. And I think modern people, we like things chronologically in order. Ancient people didn't worry about that. They were much more about, we're in the Jacob section, we'll tell everything about Jacob, and then later we'll have everything about Joseph. And so I make a case that Joseph was not here, that this happened after Joseph had been sold into slavery. Because if you remember, Joseph went up near Shechem to find his brothers after this incident where we'll see Joseph said, you put a death sentence on us, to Simeon and Levi. And it doesn't seem like Jacob would send his favored son up near Shechem to find his brothers after they had been in this situation. And so anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's food for thought. But it is disappointing to me. The sons of Jacob came upon the slave, and they plundered the city because their sister had been defiled. So they felt this is revenge. They took the sheep, they took the oxen and donkeys, what was left in the city and what was in the field, the food, and all their wealth, all their little ones, all their children, and wives they took captive, just like any ancient Near Eastern army would take slaves of the children. This is the way military action was done in the ancient world. This is normal. And that's why violence, the Old Testament is violent, because they lived in a violent world, but this is odd to us. But this is the norm for warfare. And they plundered even all that was in the houses. They wiped them out. Now, just because they did that does not mean that the Bible is endorsing that kind of behavior. Same thing, last week we talked about there was polygamy by Bible characters. The Bible is not endorsing polygamy. It's recognizing this world that they live in, and the way it tells us in storytelling technique, it does not give us a bullet list of why something is wrong and why we should not do it, and specific commands. Thou shalt not plunder, thou shalt not take sex slaves, etc. They show us bad consequences of doing immoral actions. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me by making me, says, a stench in the nostrils, obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and Perizzites. And since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. So in other words, that is the indictment on these events. We did not act honorably. We tricked people, slew them, then we looted and we took slaves. We looted it. I shall be destroyed, my household and I. And so we asked the question that they asked. Simeon and Levi answered, should he treat our sister like a harlot? Where were you, Jacob? Now, that verse 30 tells us God disapproves of what they did. And then verse 31 tells us that God disapproved of how Jacob did. Okay? Should he treat our sister like a harlot? So list the people that do wrong in this story. Now, we don't have time to give evidence. But who do you think did wrong in this story?
Everybody.
Everybody. Okay, well, we'll go with that. Now list the good guys. Who were the good guys in this story? Who are the people that model behavior that we are to emulate as faithful followers of God? In my opinion, there's absolute zero. There are no role models. This is not a story with a good guy in it. This is a story of warning. If you begin to water down the truth, if you begin to think, for them pagan, for us secular, philosophical, then you are going to take yourself, you're going to take your family, and maybe your church off the rails. And then it's just a train wreck, and it's only destructive. No good outcomes come from leaving God's will behind and putting your own will forward. No good comes from immorality. No good will come from secular thinking. Check yourself. This story is meant to be a mirror held up to us about compromise. And there are no good guys in this story. What is the moral function of the story? I think it's, as I said, it is a warning story, like Judges, of compromise, being tempted, seduced by what the world can give you. Is there a connection between this story and Genesis 38? Now, unless you're a pundit, you probably don't remember Genesis 38. So why don't we stop there? And you can, if you want to read Genesis 38, this is a little bit obscure. Frankly, I'm a very academic person, and I make a connection between Genesis 38 and Genesis 34, and I'll give you a hint on the direction. I believe everything in the Bible has to do with Jesus, and at this point, Jesus is a very vague promise that going back to the beginning of Genesis, about the seed of the woman that's going to come and fix things, fix our sin problem. And I'll give a further hint that in order to pass this genetic seed down from generation to generation, the seed of promise, the messianic seed, the line of descendancy, the kingly line, you need a man and a woman to pass the seed. And so see if you can take that and find a connection. We'll pick up here next week with Genesis 38, and we'll read through it. And I'll go ahead and tell you, it's an awful story. Maybe Mom and Dot, y'all shouldn't read this. Genesis 38. It just y'all can tear Genesis 38 out of your Bible and just throw it away. There's no good in it for y'all. But let's stop there. Let's say a prayer and be done.